My name is Mikayla Sinead. Welcome. I'm the moderator for this conversation. There's many hats that I wear, but the hat that I'm wearing today is in my role with Creative Central, in the capacity of caring about this region, caring about creativity in this region, and wanting to make sure that the folks that want an opportunity can live that. One of the reasons why I do what I do is because I'm a gamer. I'm a massive fan of video games. I always have been. It's wrapped in nostalgia. It's wrapped in my nan's house. It's wrapped in competition with my cousins. Sometimes I let them win. Often I win. But we don't talk about when I don't. But the fact of the matter is, gaming is home for me. Gaming means home and means a safe space to explore and to build and to imagine, dream and play, which I think we all need a lot more of. And so I'm absolutely delighted to be able to be here at this panel talking about the importance of gaming, the importance of building the world that we deserve, that folks want, that communities that we serve are going to go into happily. There are three fantastic folks here to share in this conversation that I'd love to have them introduce themselves, but I'll just remind us all of the provocation. That's the term for this. So with the blur between virtual and real world building, how do we design spaces for future generations to play and connect? How is a city's identity shaped by its culture, and how does content such as video games contribute to a city's evolving narrative? So, would you like to introduce yourselves and tell us why was it important for you to be here today?
Hi everyone, my name is Melodie. I'm a director at Hadid Architects. I think you're familiar probably with a lot of the work of the practice for the past 45 years. For me, it's important because this is around, it's just so important to connect with people who are doing really great things in their communities. It's my first time to Birmingham, so I've had the best welcome. So thank you to Karen and everyone here. And this is a topic that is very much at the forefront of what a lot of our research teams are working on. So to bridge both the physical and the virtual realm that we're exploring and that we're building in was important to be here for today.
Bye. Thank you.
That was so short and sweet, and now you're going to let me run ragged. Are you sure? I've already told Mikayla to shut me up if I get excited, so that's the context. Can everyone hear me okay? Can I tell a story?
If it's about the introduction of you and why you're here
That's
today.
Why we have Mikayla Sinead. My name is Amahra. Really nice to meet everyone. I am a Birmingham born and raised, if you couldn't tell by the wonderful accent. I have a friend by the name of AJ, and he lives in a place called Barking and Dagenham. Anyone know Barking and Dagenham?
Yes.
Right. So Barking and Dagenham, AJ describes as the sexiest place on earth. And that's what happens when people who know Barking and Dagenham, right, that's what it solicits. So I'm channeling AJ's energy and saying I live in the sexiest place on earth. It's called Birmingham. Right. Thank you. Hello, if you hear me. The story that I wanted to share is I grew up in the 90s and I was obsessed with a little game you may or may not have heard of called Grand Theft Auto. Anyone?
Small game.
Gang. I see some raised hands. I know you were playing. Grand Theft Auto was, I was obsessed with it. A little bit because we weren't allowed to play because it was bad, and apparently we'd all turn into like thieves and murderers and what have you. That there's a whole piece around that. But the reason that I was most obsessed with the game was because of the maps. I loved the idea that you could discover the world as you walked it. I loved the fact that there were challenges attached. I love the radio stations, the later on the games got. I still love GTA, by the way. But for me, games were the first kind of portal into thinking about imagination. My journey then took me in a lot of different directions. I'm still an artist. The first thing that I got into was I used to write stories when I was a kid. I used to design my own cities and I would write stories about the people who lived there. I was a big nerd, right, if you couldn't tell. So I started to write stories about the characters who lived in my make-believe cities. I started to design like the infrastructure, though I didn't have that language. I became really obsessed for a time in sanitation, and how does waste, work in this make-believe place. I was 10. Microsoft Word was kind of new, all of these things are happening. And then I got into theatre that way, first through set design and then through making work as a theatre maker. And very quickly I became disillusioned with the idea that the worlds that we're longing for could only be speculative. You know, I really wanted to be a part of actually making real and making tangible the worlds that I was desiring, and also the worlds that our communities were dreaming up together. And gaming was always like a portal into doing that. So I'm here because, like Mikayla, I love championing this idea of imagination and play. And more so, I want us to continuously think about the radical precedents that exist within our own lives and within our own stories, and how do we draw upon them? Because I never would have imagined that from GTA I'd be doing anything that I'm doing now, to be honest. So I kind of am here to constantly be a part of that invitation to return to how do we like to play.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pauline Roche. Until recently, I was the community lead for digital LNS, neighbourhood network schemes in Birmingham, working with community groups and volunteer organisations in each of the neighbourhoods to help older people and disabled people make better use of the internet, basically. I'm a freelance journalist. I produce and co-present a programme on YouTube on Mondays, season 6 about to start, talking about online communications and digital inclusion. I'm a librarian. My backstory, 9 years old, sitting on the floor of a mobile library service that came to our village every 2 weeks only, devouring as many books as I could in the 2 hours that the library, one mobile libraries in the village, and then taking home the 2 books I could read over that time, reading by the street light because my mother didn't want me to read too late into the night, but I love reading. Anyway, I'm an open data advocate. I've been working in the open since 2012, having discovered smart cities and tech for good projects. And there I started hearing about the social and economic value of open data, including connecting with organisations like 360 Giving, which where charitable funders share their data about who they're funding and what projects they're funding, and DataKind, a charity that helps other charities make the best use of their data. I work, as I said, I worked until recently with digital LNS, working to bridge the digital divide and end digital poverty. I want people to have access so that digital, which is about using technology and some of the culture processes and business methods of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectations, that it's open to people at all levels of digital skills, and for people to be aware of the Consumer Duty Act. Just because something is online doesn't mean that should be the only avenue for people to use it. If people don't want to be online or want a different way of accessing things, they should be able to do that as well, and there is legislation about that. As well as Birmingham Tech Week, this week is also Get Online Week, so lots of community organisations around the city are trying to help other people to get online so they can use the resources that are out there. I want to work with others to ensure we don't leave anybody behind. And you may have heard of software as a service. Anybody heard of software as a service? It's a tech thing that often is talked about. Think of me as Pauline as a service.
No. Told you it's a lovely bunch. That's great, isn't it? My job's done. This is easy. This is great. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm gonna start with you, because I had the absolute pleasure of having a chat with you before this and finding out more about your work, and I was just so fascinated, and I loved everything that I saw, and it just made me want to know more and more and more. So let them in on the secret. Tell us a little bit more about the world about your work and the blurring of virtual and real world in the examples that you have with your company.
First of all, so if you want to see any of these projects, I can show you online or on my phone in the future. But for the purposes of this discussion, I think it's probably interesting if I almost rewind all the way to 45 years ago when the office was founded. So even before the age of computers, I think our practice, or let's say even in those 45 years, probably the first 20 years, we didn't have that many built projects, maybe just a couple. And so Zaha, our founder, had created the studio, which redefined a kind of vocabulary of spatial organization, redefined the possibilities in architecture. And what I mean by that is they were working with painting on canvas, with drawing, perspectival ways of like taking abstraction as a way to redefine how you can organize spaces. I can reorganize the plan in architecture. So even before the age of the digital tools that came in, it was a studio that attracted all of these people who were inspired by this new vision for how we could approach the way that we design spaces and we create spaces for people to bring them together, inspiring places, spaces that are also like, there's a whole array of how you bring these different portions together. Which then makes it really interesting because as the computer started to become a part of the workflow, then the studio is very well placed to be able to take that almost like dynamic, fluid approach towards space to a whole other level. And then that brings us to today. I mean, I'm trying to do this as brief as possible, where we have this huge influx of new technologies and new, even more advanced digital tools. And what that means is we can take a lot of information around us. We can take a lot more layers of complexity and simulate that in our designs before we even go to build them or before we even freeze the layout. We have these kind of tools, as a lot of architecture firms do, to simulate, let's say, in terms of design for sustainability, measuring how the sun is coming in, how do you minimize the amount of structure, but also actually, Barish, my colleague, is here. And there are teams that are building, they're building apps, building their own software to create heat maps, analyzing our buildings to understand which ones create the most optimal kind of circulation and ways for people to feel connected with better views, with more efficient ways for all of the building services to be arranged. So that's just in the world of kind of like digital twin, replicating, simulating what's physically going to be built in our design process. But then we're obviously full of very curious people and colleagues in the office. So we're also exploring the full potential of what these tools can do for us. So I think some of that would be, let's say, well, okay, so the natural extension is also, there was a government-funded research project where we were looking at what if you design this space and then you're also working with the structural design and lighting design. Everything is literally materializing in 3D in real time. And then to take that a step further, we were working with an artist named Rafik Anadol, and we were training an algorithm with thousands of images of our projects. That's not enough. Our principal was sitting there spending hours to train the algorithm, because I think what we found is a lot of people know Hadid architects, and if you type that into a prompt, you're going to get something that is a kind of average of what a lot of people assume. And so it took a lot of work to be able to steer and train the algorithm in a different, more present and more relevant way to the way that we're working. I'm just trying to think. Oh, and then there's a video game that we designed at Fortnite. So there's a creator-based island that we worked with Epic Games, which was then looking at basically you can master plan an area on the Southfield River in London, and you can create voxels, and that voxel might be a piece of structure, it might be an office, it might be residential or a pathway, and the scoring is based off of creating as close-knit and walkable of a mixed-use region of the city as you can. And it also gave people a vision that beyond the world of Minecraft and Roblox, there's also this kind of architectural intention that's possible to create in a modular way. And that was something for gamers, but there were also very real world principles about city planning that we had embedded into it. And I guess the last project maybe I should reference is there's an artist that we're working with, Darren Johnston, and the project is called Portal. And it's very much he is very much lived the world of gaming, almost like saved him throughout the pandemic. And that was a place that he resided in a lot. And so this is very much inspired by his time there. But he's working with our architects and our researchers to create this piece, which is very, very visceral emotionally. It can inhabit a stage in a theater. It can inhabit this room. It can inhabit a shop front. So there's many different scales, but it's bringing together, in technical terms, let's say, the volumetric capture of, he works in dance, light, sound, very, very multimedia, and between choreography for digital avatars as well as physical dancers, and his inspirations from Western as well as Asian cultures, it all comes together in this really
stunning,
beautiful piece.
Yeah. Thank you, Melodie. I'd massively encourage folks to have a look at the content that Melodie has, and to have a look at the research. I remember when we had our chat, it felt like I was is anyone a fan of The Sims here? There's a few Sims fans. It was like The Sims, but like a million times better. It completely blew my mind, and it made me think again. These the pastime, or the playing around in these kind of game worlds, then are actually training important folks in that design, in that building, that later down the line with an organisation like ZHA, it's like, hey, well, this is what can happen. And then that partnership with Fortnite, I think, is so interesting. I always and I think quite a few people can kind of think of Fortnite, oh, that thing that the kids are on. Mm. But let's think about, these are meeting, these community spaces. These are where people convene, and how else can we interact and meet people where they're at? So often we talk about meet people where they're at. Hey, they're in Fortnite. What can we do there? Roblox is another example of those kind of spaces, especially when we're thinking about the future. Mm. Thank you so much, Melodie. Okay, so Fortnite, Roblox, Sims, GTA, all of the influences, all of the games. Tell us a little bit more, and I think in your intro you did a wonderful job, Amahra, of painting that picture of the importance of games to you. But I really wanted to lean in more to that that exploration of playing, that exploration of this building your world, which has created, well, what is created. So please tell us a little bit more about your practice in this way.
There's almost like so many ways that I could start, but I kind of wanted to pick up on a thread that you've offered there. And so I'm always kind of like flitting between like my artistic practice, and also then how, as an artist, do I respond and create another kind of form. And organisation is one of those forms that I'm really interested in, like approaching as an artist, as someone really invested in imagination and play. Technically, I didn't want to start an organisation. I wanted a job and couldn't find one. There's something in that I'm still kind of recovering from. But coming up to 12 years ago now, I started an organisation called Maya, because I was really interested in how, as artists, do we kind of give ourselves license to imagine the world that we're longing for, and what's the relationship between artists, imagination, particularly Black artists, and imagination and liberation. Like, what is that paradigm? And so we started very, very speculatively. As an independent artist, I also had a project that I was working on at the same time that was called Beats, Rhymes and Cities. And with that project, we were engaging generative AI and working with a music producer, a rapper, and we used to organize like different groups of people and said, how could our artistry inform architecture? So we used to have like sound responsive, these architectural models would produce, and then we'd 3D print them. I mean, it's like super basic, right? But what it enabled us to have was different kinds of conversations around urban planning and the design of places. And it was, as Mikayla was speaking to, it was starting exactly from where we are. And I'm saying this because we did this project I did it with 6-year-old kids. I did it with a group of elders who were in their 60s, 70s, and one was 84. And I've done it with people who are in school, out of school. And if we'd have said, we're going to do a thing about urban planning, I mean, I would have been like, hell yes, as a 9-year-old. I don't know about everyone. But it was that idea of, there is also a spatial language and a spatial practice within something like hip hop, within something like grime music. I really believe that. I could do a whole sermon about that, but I won't for today. And so for me, it was like, well, if we were to start where we are, how would we do that? So while that was happening, and there was for me this like real deepening of a kind of analysis of the politics of space, right? And how we coordinate it, who has access to it, who gets to design it, who gets to think in what kind of ways around the built environments that we inhabit. At the same time, then I was going back into to Maya, the organization, and being like, I think that we can fight for more than a city says that we can have, right? And one of those things was, when we started Maya, it was very much like, if we were to ever have a space for us to produce our own work, we want to own the land, right? Why do we want to own the land? We are fighting for our dignity, which we believe and see as tied to land. We really understand that there's a kind of cultural value that is created and generated by artists, by practitioners. And if they aren't the ones who are holding on to that value, we are absolutely the ones who are extracted from it. So we didn't want to be a part of that cycle that says, hey, artists, come in and make a city sexy, make it vibrant, make it a place that people want to come. And then over time, we are kind of like sidelined and resources go elsewhere. And land was a key part of that. I'm going to hurry up.
Mm-hmm.
The same time, I was also on tour, and I was making a show about my granddad. I'm obsessed with my granddad. You should know this. If I could talk about my granddad for the next 22 minutes, I would, but I can't. Are you sure? So I was raised by my grandparents, and I was making a show about my grandfather, and I was working with a theatre who hadn't paid me yet. I'll name names later. They hadn't paid me yet, and I ended up staying on my friend's couch in South London, where the play was going on. And that night I dreamt about this space that kind of would have met every kind of structural and infrastructural need that I had in that moment as a pregnant, touring, very poor artist. And the space that I dreamt, it operated like a hotel, but it felt like my grandfather's house. And I remember feeling it so viscerally. I'm big on dreams also. I remember waking up, talking about it with one of my friends, and my friend had built like a number of pop-up spaces in this city in Birmingham. And I said to him, I was like, do you think I should do this? Like, do you think I could? His name is Yinka Dan Mole. I have to say this because if you see him on road, say Amahra said, all of this is your fault, right? Yinka said to me, like, yes, you can build that thing, give it a name. And we were talking about, like, let's rehearse that thing into being. So the next day I named this center, this building, as Abuelos. Abuelos means grandparents in Spanish. I call my grandfather Abuelo. And we said, we're going to build that thing. We're going to fight for the land in order to build that thing. I had no money, no experience. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a nerd about architecture and urban planning, but didn't even have the language for it. Literally a wing and a prayer, right? I'm going to fast forward 10 years of fighting for land. Also, I should say this, I really was passionate about building something outside of the city centre core. In Birmingham, an incredibly centralised city, we know that resources, investment, economics doesn't trickle outwardly. And I will stand on this hill all day, right? We needed to fight for infrastructure to be built in the community. I'm from a place called Ladywood. Again, I talked about the sexiest place on earth. I describe Ladywood as the heart of that. And we were fighting to build there. It took 10 years. As of this year, I'm going to say it, Mikayla. As of this year, we bought the land that we've been fighting for. Thank you.
Yes.
There's a long story in the how, but we bought it. And for me, it always goes back to, it started with game, it started with dream, it started with really knowing and understanding who we're trying to build with, for, having our sense of like non-negotiables and negotiables. We were offered buildings in times gone by. We were offered money in times gone by. It wasn't the right kind of money, or it was money that was like really contested with our principles. They were offered buildings, but we were offered them on 5-year leases at best, maybe 10 years. We didn't want to play that game. And I always say, I'm happy to keep doing stuff in my living room. We don't need space just for the sake of having space. Again, land for us is tied to dignity. So we were trying to do that, which means you have to really know what your non-negotiables are and have to really center community in every decision. And I was just starting to say to Melodie earlier that I never anticipated all of the systems that would have had to have been transformed to make one infrastructural piece happen. And I talked to Karen for days on end about, we have to suddenly become well-versed in architecture, in technology, in urban planning, in finance, in economics. We have to be so well-versed in all of these layers, all the while trying to really center every decision in community. And it's hard, and it's taken 10 years just to get to land. And we say, okay, now we can start. Like, now we get started. But I think all of that coming from a place of play, coming from a place of dreaming and speaking these ideas out in community.
Stunning. Thank you. I want to pick up on a point here that I'm thinking of, Pauline. If Amahra didn't have access to GTA and the maps and being able to play that game in the 90s, it wouldn't have happened. Gaming is not a cheap hobby. Gaming is quite expensive. It very much can be. And when we're talking about the amazingness that games can produce, there is also a privilege and a price tag that's attached to that, like so many things. So you're already talking about 10 years in the making of doing this, and that was after levels of privilege and access before that. But there's a whole host of folks that don't even have that. They don't even have that access point. And Pauline, I'd love to hear a bit more about the work that you're doing in terms of bridging that, in terms of access, in terms of there are amazing things that can happen in this technology, but if you don't have access, what is it even your future?
I love hearing you talk about maps, because that was one of the first parts of the open source community that I really got engaged with. There's a whole community of people called OpenStreetMappers. OpenStreetMap is a thing. Even Google uses it, you know, there's people out there who just map for the fun of it. You know, they'll go out and they'll identify the tiniest thing on the street so that we all have a better understanding of what's going on. So it's great to hear about maps being so popular. One of the other parts of the infrastructure that I kind of relate well to is an alliance called Digital Poverty Alliance, a network of organizations who care about people being digitally excluded. They got together a few years ago, and in fact, one of the founders has now started a new project called the Next Path Consortium. So they want to make devices cheaper for people to able to afford. So because everybody needs a device, and unfortunately, the Digital Poverty Alliance has shared some data recently in response to the government's proposal for digital IDs, which we can talk about at a different item as well. But almost 4.5 million adults in the UK do not own a smartphone. Everybody thinks everybody does smartphone. Lots of people don't. And more than 1 in 4 of those are over 75. So like some over 70, you know, you might dismiss over 75s, but actually they have a lot, older people have a lot to offer. You know, especially you talk about your grandparents, you know, Indigenous people especially, they just have a love for the land and understanding that we need to value and shouldn't forget that. Around 1.75 million households in the UK are offline, and 11 million adults lack the digital skills to be able to complete basic online tasks. So the things that you in the audience and we up here take for granted, lots of people still can't do, and that's not a right thing. Locally, the data is that 8.6% of Birmingham's population is digitally excluded. That's about 50,000 people. So not a small number. Of households earning between 6 and 10,000, only 51% have access to the internet at home, compared to 99% of households with an income over 40,000. So you know, there's a huge gaps here. And in the West Midlands, nearly a quarter of people don't use the internet or don't have access to it. So you know, all the things that are being created and talked about, they're being left out of it, and it's just not right. Not right to me. So what we need is a whole slew of digital champions. Hands up, by the way, in the audience, if you've ever helped anybody get online, do something online, helped a neighbour, a friend, great. We've got a room full of digital champions. That's great. Own that badge, be that person, help the people, tell people you're a digital champion, because it's a good thing to do that. And it's, you know, you are giving back in some way. There are other charities out there, Digital Unite, for example, the National One, runs programs that train whole corporates to do digital champion work. It can be very scary. I think people think they can't help somebody else, but we always do. Everybody helps everybody else usually, so it's a good thing to do. And they're always looking for more digital champions. So, you know, more of that to help, you know, bring to life more of what Melodie and Amahra are talking about.
Thank you. Melodie, I'd love to come back to this point that you made earlier around like the need of training the AI, and the need of like the people. Because when we're talking about AI, when we're talking about technology, it's almost like the technology is doing that. The technology is a tool on what the human can do, what the people can do. So I'm curious about, as always, talent pipeline, and I'm thinking about young people. I'm thinking about the future world builders in this, and the sort of initiatives or work that you do that can encourage already a room full of digital champions to take back to their organisations, or take back in terms of calls to action of how are we investing in talent to train the tech to be the tool, not the driving force of these things.
I mean, to be really honest, from a personal level, if I think about it and everyone that we should be helping, I get a little bit overwhelmed. But as a company, what we do, like, there are really great organizations out there, and we're based in London, so we're trying to partner with a number of them who are working. Like one of them, for instance, is called Jason. He has Found Futures, which is a recruitment agency for a really diverse workforce. But on the other hand, then he has a personal passion, which is working with local schools which are underserved, and then partnering them with an architecture firm. And then so we work with these young people. We go to their school, and then they have an architecture competition for a brief that we've drafted with them, and then the finalists get to come spend some time. Well, all the students get to come spend time in our office. And also, I'm really involved with looking at, let's say, the work experience and the internship programs that we offer, and trying to make that space that we can create those mentorship opportunities for our young architects, as well as the teenagers who are looking to, exploring what their future might look like. But it's really hard because I don't see a lot, I guess, like on the kind of patron or like benefactor side. I wish that there was a bit more coordination, because it feels like we're helping these organizations with that age student, this organization in this part of London, or here. And there's another one that we worked with. It's called Beyond the Box. And so they basically help to co-create and co-design an architectural pavilion, and the architects also come in and help them build it. But they also track the students over time into when they're studying in school, into then when they eventually get placements. So there's a lot of kind of zooming in and zooming out. I think also being a director at the firm like ours, it's a big responsibility. So we're also trying to do everything that carries the weight of 45 years of practice. And that whole history, you can't just, like chop it up to the last 2 years. It's actually, there's this vision, there's this approach towards the work. And then we're trying to also, and there are all these young people who are inspired by it. And if it's even just engaging with them, and they will eventually become people that are more comfortable speaking up about what should be happening in their neighborhood. Or if it's someone then who realizes, like, I can study architecture, because they never really met anybody that showed them that was an opportunity. So there's a whole range of opportunities, but every single instance makes a difference. Even I think like our head of PR, he wouldn't want me saying this, but he's behind the scenes on our Instagram trying to also respond to the young people who are posting, and like also kind of platforming them when they're enthusiastic about some of the work that we're doing.
Gotcha. Thank you. It's so important to, in this when time feels like an absolute myth, when time feels like it's not there, it's like gold dust and just goes, to be intentional about how you spend it, how you invest that time, and spending the time that you may not even see the instant effect of it. Having this conversation with someone could just plant a seed, or like a ripple, whatever kind of motivational Instagram quote you want to kind of put in. But that kind of time with folks at a point where they're making their decisions and considering, because who knows what's gonna happen, but giving folks as much data and information as possible, like this is what it could be, allows for that, and it then opens up for the exploration of that play. Often there's the term of you can't be what you can't see. So making yourself available and accessible in that way can help, especially if we're talking about the future of it.
Yeah, there's another one, Barbara, who started Girls Under Construction, which is an incredible organization as well. And she opens up these pathways. But I realized I didn't answer the second part of your question.
Go ahead.
Should I do that myself, right?
Sure.
About tools. No, like, it's just really clear on our teams, because they're working with they're experimenting with all of these tools. But when you have the more experienced designer, they're getting much more sophisticated results. And that has to come down to the prompting. We're experimenting with also... this is an echo of what Karen and other people were saying throughout the day, which is you have to drive the technology. So let's say an old example, the office, they used to use photocopy machines, but they would pull the paper, so then the drawing would become skewed. So it's the same tool that everyone's using. We're working with AI generators, but we're also adding hand sketches into the process. We're taking 3D models, feeding it into the AI model to be able to control and really steer and direct the workflow and the creative process.
The people. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you added that bit. Okay, Amahra, I'm going to come back to you to talk a little bit more about the future-facing R&D organisation that Hood Future Studio is. I am biased because I do work with Hood Future Studio, but just call that out as well. But tell me, what's the importance of like investing intergenerationally in this space, in the work that you're doing for the culture, for Birmingham, and why it's important where you're investing that practice, and how that will shape in your future the identity of this city.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I mean the obvious thing is I feel like I'm always in an intergenerational dialogue, not least because all of the work that I'm doing is directly informed like by as a person being raised by my elders, you know, and I'm also a mother, which means I have excellent dialogues with these, you know, the next gen of future builders. My kids are definitely like leaders in the making, like no doubt. But for me, so there was a point in which, so we've been operating as Maya for 12 years. And I'm big on just a general acknowledgement of what would it mean if at the start of an organization's life, we lead with the question of when do we end? You know, when is it necessary for a pivot? How could we see endings or death also as something generative, also as something that births new possibilities? And it became really clear that there was a point in which the Maya story needed to be sunset to make way for something else. And that pivot came at a moment for me where I'd realized that we needed to get really at the root of a story of dispossession and displacement, particularly in a city like Birmingham. And I'm saying this because I think Birmingham is already fundamentally a story of diaspora. It's already a story of multiple communities, cultures, languages, histories, and it's very complex and it's not neat. And it's also then a future where that is only going to continue, right? And for me, I understand that's what I love about the city that I'm from. Its abundance, you know, its sense of possibility because of that experience. So for us to get to Hood Future Studio is trying to address in the most propositional, in the most experimental way, how would we address displacement and dispossession? And that displacement is of our land and our spaces as much as it is our culture, our memories, our history, our education. These are the things that are at threat. So the idea of reclamation for us, of you know, gathering land, and let me just say this really explicitly, I don't believe in land ownership as the ultimate story. That's not my MO. My MO is always about liberation. So for me, the only way that I understand how to participate, I was going to say in this Babylon system, if that makes sense to you, makes sense to you. The only way I understand how to operate in this is, right, what bits do we have to pay attention to and what do we discard? I know that the only way to really have a dialogue about power in service of community in the global West is related to land, you know. And so for us, that was the really important point, that we acquire land so that my dream is that we ultimately liberate land so that land belongs to herself. That's just me, you know. I talk about that till the cows come home. But for me, I think that then is already a diasporic intergenerational dialogue. For us to be able to engage with that land story across all of the levels is what enables that 7 generations ahead, 7 generations before, in the very native indigenous cosmology that talks about those kind of timescales. And I'll say this because I think I saw Jez walk into the room. I don't know if Jez is still here. Yes, homie. So if you don't know Jez, get to know Jez. I remember a couple of years ago now, being on Station Street with Karen. Does anyone know, everyone knows Station Street, Birmingham? Right. So being on Station Street and realizing that this is a street that was, you know, we're at threat at losing a lot. And it's not just about our heritage, it's also about our futures, right? Our futures are tied to the space in which we can come together. And at the moment that I'd realized that street was coming to the end of a 100-year lease, effectively, right? The moment that I realized that, I'm like, I don't think we think long term enough about the change or like the scale of change that is both happening and is both required. And for me, in order to even think about land, it requires us to think intergenerationally from from the offset. I mean, I didn't really answer your question in the way that I thought I would, but
I love where you brought us, Ben.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
What I want to hear about is how can other people get involved in what you're doing?
Is that, are we there yet?
We're getting there. I see the plan. I see the vision. I love it. I absolutely love it. We are coming to a close here with the phenomenal conversation, and I think after this we've got a break, so there's an opportunity for us to process and mull over, and if anyone wants to talk about games, I'm available, and I imagine folks would be happy to talk as well. I'd love to end this point on sort of call to action. What would you as wonderful souls like to share with the audience, and what action can they take and move forward? I'd love to start with you, Pauline, and I would just whisper OD camp, and then we'll come back.
Open Data Camp is an online conference where that's been running for the last 10 years. The last one was in Edinburgh at the end of September. Happens every year. I've been involved with all 10 of them. Bringing people together around open data who care about open data, and opening up to make data available, to make possible the work that goes on here to some extent. Lots of people come from all over the government and public sector and private sector. It's a great place to be, to make networks, to build the work, build the jobs. We've got a LinkedIn page. Please have a look at it and see what's happening there. The other thing is about digital trustees. We've already established that you're all digital champions. If we want to take that further, if you care about a topic, animals, domestic violence, land reclamation, whatever, there'll be a charity that will serve that. There's 165,000 charities in the UK. Most of them are small, running from people's front rooms, one woman and a cat. Not one man and a dog, and they need help. They need help with design, data, and digital. But if you don't care about the topic, then don't get involved. It's can be heartbreaking work, but it's worth it to be investing in an organisation that you care about. To become a digital trustee, there's an organisation in Scotland called Third Sector Lab. They do training sessions, speed dating sessions. One's coming up on the 6th of November. Get involved, have a look, get involved with something local. Or Reach Volunteering also is a great platform. They have at least 5 digital volunteers requests within 5 miles of the city centre. People need your help, people need your knowledge and enthusiasm. Think about getting involved.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pauline. Amahra, call to action?
3 quick ones. Lol. 3 quick ones. One is, if anyone has a more sophisticated set of suggestions for how I could revive the Beats, Rhymes and Cities project, I'd love to talk. 2 is, so now we have the land. Now we've got to build the thing, apparently. And we're really interested. Again, Mikayla mentioned that there's a lot of gamers in the team, and Mikayla's definitely been a key part of drawing how much of us really are gamers in the team. I'm really interested in how we can engage gaming and technology more broadly in thinking about how the building operates, not just thinking about circulation, but like the full experience of how people interact, wayfind, navigate this space. What if we thought about building this building and approaching it like Zelda? That's always my starting point. So if anyone's got any experience, ideas, thoughts, anyone wants to talk in that direction, I'd love to. And then my last one is an offering, almost like an invitation. When we're in spaces like this, I'd love us to continue reflecting on what are the precedents that we can draw in our own lives that aren't just my career trajectories. I want to know your life. I want to know where you've come from and how does that make its way into the work that you do, so we don't become polarized in ourselves, or we don't have to kind of abandon the parts of ourselves that have actually made us who we are. That also needs to be a part of your work. And I'd just love to hear about what were you playing, what technology has changed your life. And I don't care whether that was like a pancake maker, I really want to hear about that level of things, because I love stories as well.
Thank you, Mom. Melodie?
I think it's really interesting. We just met, but you brought up a lot of threads that I think are also quite resonant for me. And one is the idea of intergenerational influence and long-term, a long arc of planning. And I've reflected a lot also for myself. It's like this midlife period where you reflect a lot on the formative experience that have shaped you. And I think you also have that effect on other people in your life or communities. And I think if I have to bring any call to action right now, center around cultivating creativity, and this just, really taking the time to know that you bring everything of who you are as a vessel experiences. And that impact can have many different ripple-on effects in the short term and in the long term. And what it would, you have to take all of those intuitions and those experiences that you've learned to then see how you can drive the tool, how you can push the technology and innovate with what we have. And that could be, you might not be a creative, it might be a young person in your life, it might be someone in your team, but cultivating creativity it's a long-term, multi-layered process, and there's always something that we can do to push a little bit beyond the horizons that we see.
Stunning, thank you. My call to action stays quite similar. We're very lucky and privileged to be in a space like this when we're coming together with Birmingham Tech Week, to have these kind of conversations, to be thinking in this way, to be able to hear from great guests and the conversations that you're having in between. What I'd really love you all to do is take a look around and think about the people who are not in this room, who absolutely should be in this room, and what you can do next time to make it easier for them to be here. Thank you all so much for your time. Play more. Speak to you soon.